Good evening, namaskar, and happy Republic Day. Welcome to this extraordinary event in Bombay's very eventful evening life. Very unusual. And I'm absolutely delighted to see what kind of friends have turned up and in what numbers and very punctually. I think this day has become special in a very contextual manner that the great Yogacharya, Mr. B.K.S. Iyengar, has been given Padma Vibhushan today. When I got free from my day-to-day activity a year ago, I knew what I was going to do with my time, which was really to pursue greater understanding and spread of our great heritage because it had benefited me immensely. But my whole task became greatly facilitated when I came across the works of Dr. Malhotra. And why that someone like him and me are pursuing this with passion. And I want to tell you something which probably most of us haven't realized. How different is the tradition of knowledge in India? I know this anecdote, or maybe this historical fact, and there may be others in more hoary past, that when Gautama the Buddha, near Varanasi, he gave his first Dhamma talk. In Pali language, they call it Dhamma. And he asked his pupils to go in all different directions. He told them, why are you to go? And he set a code for them. And that code was, you go, spread yourself and spread your teaching or spread your knowledge only if it is going to meet 3 criteria. And they were Bahujana Hitai, Bahujana Sukhai, Lokanukampai. Now, this is extremely significant, that over the years, particularly in the West, all knowledge is used for exploitation. There is something like copyright. We never heard of Valmiki or any of our great sages having anything like copyright. So it's such a profound thing, and how the West has behaved and how the East has behaved becomes very evident if you just think more about this aspect. So, sir, it's a great privilege for us to have you amongst us. A bright boy wanting to secure a career, went to St. Stephen's, he's a Delhi boy, went to St. Stephen's, studied physics, looking for some security, a good career, maybe a dream somewhere, decided to migrate to the US, went to North Carolina University, saw the advent of IT, shifted to Syracuse to computer science, by and by developed a successful enterprise in IT and media. It's a story that probably resonates and we are familiar with. But then began the unfamiliar part, that at a young age of 44, he thought enough was enough. No more pursuit of the pot of gold. And let me pay attention to the greater gold, Indian heritage. So he established in 1994 a foundation called the Infinity Foundation, which has been doing very imaginative work. Amongst the various things they have done is, they have given grants, and it's a foundation that has been created by, is not a billionaire businessman, but within his resources created grants for conducting research, creating positions for visiting professors, correcting curricula at several universities in the US, and very prominent ones like Harvard, Columbia, etc. Then on the stage have Mr. Ramji Om, that's how he likes to call himself, and he is half of the team that created this extraordinary film that you will see. And how selfless. These are very unlikely people to have made a movie. He works for the government, and Dr. Deepika Kothari, she is a physicist. She is amongst the most qualified material scientists in our country, having contributed to defense projects and so on. But the team, sheerly inspired by the heritage of yoga, created this extraordinary film. मित्रों, मैं हिंदी में ज़रूर कुछ बात कहना चाहूँगा। आज इलेक्शन का माहौल है। इतिहास में जाके देखेंगे तो चाहे वो बुद्ध थे, चाहे कृष्ण थे, चाहे महावीर थे, चाहे जीसस थे, उनकी भाषा में, लोगों की भाषा में जब तक आप बात नहीं कहते, उन्हें बात समझ में नहीं आती. So you need that language also, and you need that metaphor also, because the reality is that metaphor precedes the message. Metaphor ही समझ में नहीं आए तो message समझ में नहीं आता. Dr. Malhotra's contribution to the Indian heritage is extraordinary because of this reason, कि क्योंकि वे पश्चिम में बड़े हुए और बड़े समर्पित थे, तो how he has used solid research, the intellectual rigor of the West, to engage with the scholars of the West, and more painfully, lot of Indian scholars who blindly have towed the line of the West, and how systematically so many of them have not only plagiarized our knowledge, have sought to pervert our knowledge. So I think the two events together, I think, are trailblazing event in some manner, that with this kind of audience, if we all engage in understanding our heritage, reviving it and spreading it, it'll be absolutely wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, may I honor you, sir, with a shawl. Sir, may I request you to come and light the lamp?
Namaskar, and Vallabhji and Dr. Kothari, Ramji, friends, it's indeed an honor to be invited here for this very important event. For an important event for many reasons. It's our Republic Day. It's a great day that Iyengarji got honored. I think nobody I know deserved this kind of honor as a great son of India as much as he does. And it's also an important milestone that we're going to see a film which sets the record on the history of yoga, corrects the record on the history of yoga. My own journey has involved engaging the tradition in multiple ways, inwardly as a practitioner, outwardly in discussing, debating, arguing the way it's represented or misrepresented or diluted or appropriated or so on. So one of the patterns I discovered was what I call the U-turn theory, which is that people come and they genuinely learn. Some of them change their name, they get initiated, they get benefited from it, and some of them stay in that path, but others move on. And the temptation of the ego to own this and call it their own original knowledge and come up with some sort of a spin, some sort of a distortion is very tempting. That temptation is so high that they decontextualize. That is the stage when the Indian history, Indian context, the spiritual context is removed and it becomes something else. And then sometimes it goes even further. It gets recontextualized as either Western science or Christian yoga or Judeo-Christianity, or it either goes into it digested into a religious metaphor of the West, a framework of the West, or scientific. And at the same time, that there is a tendency to sort of dismiss the source Indian tradition, finding some flaws in it, or claiming to have found some limitations in it. And often, the worst part is that this made in US thing, or made in the West entity, then gets re-exported back to India, and Indians very eagerly accept it. A lot of this goes on. In 2000, just before IIT Kharagpur was celebrating its 50th anniversary, my foundation received a grant request from IIT Kharagpur that we should sponsor some of their conferences. And among the list, the one that caught my eye was mind sciences. Because obviously, yoga is really the origin of mind sciences. And you could argue that Patanjali was one of the first psychologists, because the whole thing about the nature of the self, the nature of the mind, is so deep in yoga and in our entire philosophy. So I asked them for more details, and I found, not surprisingly, that there was not a single talk in that two-day conference, not a single talk in their list concerning Indian approaches to mind and psychology. So I wrote to them that I'm willing to sponsor, but I would like one condition, that there should be at least one panel which talks about India's contributions to science, to the mind sciences. I got a very interesting reply, which I still keep on file. Reply was, we are scientists, we are not chauvinists, we're not saffron, we believe in truth, it has to be valid, like this. So I thought, ye kya baat hai? What is this? So I went to a few of my Western friends, whose leg I've been pulling their legs, listen, you guys have got so much out of the mother culture, you should pay back. And they would always feel kind of, okay, we'll do it one day. So I called them and said, now is your chance. I want you to go to this conference if I organize a panel. And I want you to discuss how you learned from India, who your guru was, who initiated you, how you practiced for so many decades, what benefit it has done for you, and how you are teaching it in the West, and what is its value to society in the West. And I want you to use the original Sanskrit words. I don't want you to dilute or camouflage any of the Indian stuff by using new fancy words. And this is your payback. You owe us back this, at least this much. One was Robert Thurman, head of Tibetan Buddhism at Columbia University, a very dear friend of mine. He accepted. Another was at Cambridge, who had written the translated Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Another had done Kundalini Yoga. Another was an expert in Sri Aurobindo, like that. I collected these people. They had tremendous biographies. I sent it back to IIT Kharagpur and said that this is the Indian Mind Sciences panel I'm proposing. Now, since these were all Western people, they quickly accepted it. Because, you know, sharam nahi aayi, theek hai, unhone keh diya to theek hi hoga. Maybe it's okay now that they are saying it. So they went, and they got standing ovations. Every one of that panel was a big hit. Because when our people, so subdued with this slaverish mentality, when they heard that these guys are praising it, they said, wow, this is good. So I encouraged them to accept invitations wherever they were invited, and we would sponsor them. And for a few years, we had a team presenting on Indian models of psychology and mind. We had these big conferences in Kerala, we had in Chennai, we had in Pondicherry. And the big event was when we finally got into Delhi, because they said, this is the bastion, this is the fortress we have to get in. It's so anti and so secularized and so concerned with our heritage that this is the final one. So we took that over also. And a movement started which has over 200 Indian academics in psychology who call themselves teachers of Indian psychology, and they meet once a year. In fact, my next book, which is being launched in various places, the Delhi launch, there are two launches. The afternoon launch is by Arun Shori in Delhi. The morning launch is the Psychology Department of Delhi University. They're launching that book. So we've created a whole new discipline called Indian Models of Psychology, just constantly pushing this idea further, on and on. So there are huge opportunities to change our own people's thinking, which has been very closed. And this is an example of a humble effort we have done. Another thing we've done is in University of Massachusetts, in Dartmouth, we've started a project called the SALT model of learning. SALT stands for Super Accelerated Learning Technique. Now, if you search under accelerated learning, you will find a lot of people teaching a kind of system of learning in the US, in particular Europe, called accelerated learning. They teach you math fast, and they teach you languages quick, and a lot of people send their kids to become very smart using this accelerated learning. If you look beneath the history, the teachers and the educators claimed their allegiance to Lozanov. He was a European who they say created these ideas of accelerated learning. But if you read Lozanov's own works, it's a very interesting story. In the 1950s, CIA had a project to see if there is something in yoga which can give extraordinary powers. Because if you could get extraordinary yogic powers, you could see where some missile is hiding, or you could have some kind of a military application of some extraordinary powers, siddhis. So they were doing research on it. And this is well documented that they were trying to do these research. So Soviet Union also started something similar. And they sent this man, he was a neuroscientist in the Soviet bloc. They sent him to India to find out if yogis have any extraordinary powers. And he came back and said that the one power he found is that they have extraordinary memory. Some of them can recite tens of thousands of verses without any notes. They can just keep chanting tens of thousands of verses very impeccably, and they teach it from childhood. So he was sent to figure out how that's possible, because as a neuroscientist, he didn't have a theory on how so much memory is possible, human memory. It was beyond the human memory capacity as understood at the time. So he came and he did a lot of recordings. His books are very interesting. He did a lot of recordings of yogis and people who are chanting and all of that stuff. And he found that there were certain systems of learning that one of the key criteria that made this possible is the use of multiple senses. So they're singing, there is a certain intonation, there's a certain rhythm in which they are chanting as they're learning. And so when I was young, I used to see in some traditional schools, they used to sing the mathematics tables, the multiplication tables, they used to sing, 3 times 2 is 6, like that, they used to sing. Now, I didn't know why it's so. Well, this guy came up with the theory that the musical side is recorded in the right brain, and the analytical knowledge is recorded in the left brain. And when you are getting both together, it's encoded in dual brain. It's encoded in both brains. So the left and right brain both capture different aspects of this pattern, and they're correlated with each other. Similarly, when you dance the knowledge, so all the different systems of learning we have, where I would include, tantra, not only the physical yoga, but all the meditation systems, all the breathing, all of these, they affect different parts of the consciousness. And so what he found is that when you activate and develop and evolve the total being, multiple planes and parts of being, as Sri Aurobindo called it, then this person's faculties are superior. The person learns better, can recall better. So what we've developed in University of Massachusetts is a prototype. Somebody gave a grant, and then the university, which is a state university, matched it. And the purpose is to revive traditional Vedic and yogic learning in the American school system. And what they are able to prove, this is a very interesting part, what they're able to prove is that the normal K through 12, which people require 12 years to go through and pass the exam, school passing exam, our students are able to do it in 7 years. So in 7 years, we can do the learning that people normally do in 12 years. And these are not extraordinary students, they're just average students. So the use of yogic methods and related Indian methods is becoming very popular, is becoming quite widespread. There are many cognitive therapies. For instance, Vipassana has become mindfulness meditation, and from mindfulness meditation, which John Kabat-Zinn claims to have invented, which is not true, they have come up with many medical therapies. So there is something called DBT, dialectic behavior therapy, very popular among psychiatrists and so on. And that, when you look up, they will say it came from mindfulness meditation, but they won't go further and say where that came from. So these are, I'm looking at the applications to removing addiction, various cardiac functions, pulmonary functions. So not just mind and psychology, but the whole physiology and the creativity, the idea of bliss and satisfaction without consumerism. That's another, that people who are advanced practitioners of yoga, they seem to be content. You know, they have not that much need, and they have a huge bandwidth of tolerance and acceptance of things, and also reduction of violence among people who tend to be violent. So the applications are very practical. And this is a very Indian thing. It's as Indian a thing as one can have. So I've been looking at how yoga has gone. It's sort of, in the 60s and 70s, some of the major gurus who took the yoga, either they physically went there and established their camp in the West, particularly in the US, or like in the case of Iyengar, they stayed here, but their students were mainly Westerners who got certified and went there and so on. I've seen the pattern of how the practitioners have tended to gradually decouple and disassociate themselves from the source and come up with new formations, new patterns, new terminologies, and now a new history. So there are books on the history of yoga which are very popular in the West, and I'm very glad this this documentary will topple that. These books are claiming that yoga came out of yoga came into India from through the YMCA program, according to one of these. And BKS Iyengar's own guru had an inferiority complex that Indians are weak in front of the British. This is an effect of 1857 and so on. And so he wanted to appropriate some of these exercises from the gym exercises, but he wanted to give it an Indian name so that Indians would not feel that, they would also feel pride that they're doing their own thing. So he came up with this idea that we'll call it yoga. And so these things are, these books you may think are quackery, and they are, but they're getting awards. They are, some of the people in India are giving awards to these books, because it's quite interesting that people in India are giving awards to scholars who promote these sort of ideas. Now, I just want to say a little bit to position yoga so that people don't think it's only about me personally, one person individually, selfish, and not about society. There is this conception that the yogi is sort of believes that the world is an illusion, and he's not socially responsible, he's not concerned about the well-being of other people. And so a nation of yogis would be kind of dysfunctional. They would not be able to, progress. And that is a myth. That is really not true. In fact, if you have clean people, clean yogic people, sattvic people, people who found anand within themselves, people who can attain stillness, who have a long attention span, who can concentrate, who have compassion, then with these people as the building blocks, you can have a much better society. You can have a much more harmonious society, corruption-free society, good mathematicians, good thinkers. After all, our country produced such a huge amount of knowledge in very practical things like medicine, metallurgy, shipbuilding, agriculture, textiles, water harvesting. And in order to make this point, that our civilization is not a civilization of people negating the world, negating the practical aspects of the world, but with the inner evolution, they're able to engage the world better. In order to make this point, my foundation started 20 volumes, a 20-volume project, of which 9 volumes have come out, on the history of Indian science and technology. This had never been done before. Somebody had done 30 volumes on Chinese history of science and technology and made a big impact on the way China is understood. So when people study Chinese history, they're not just studying wars and which king came and what happened, they're also studying knowledge, Chinese knowledge. And when they are studying India, unfortunately, we haven't done the same amount of work. So we decided to do that. And we found that the contributions of India in the practical dimensions of science and technology are absolutely extraordinary in so many fields. So being a yogic society, being a society of rishis, founded by rishis, and people involved in the inner domain has not made us neglect the outer domain. It means that we can approach the outer domain in a better way. And in fact, you find students, in the US, they've done a lot of research on the effects of yoga, and they found that students' grades are better, athletes are better, artists can perform better. So the performance of regular practical duties is superior because the mind is calmer and you can function better. Now, in order to sort of summarize very quickly the inner and the outer link that yoga can provide, a person who's properly developed as a yogi can perform much better also in the outer domain. What I'd like to suggest is the use of, in language we have the use of first person, second person, and third person. First person refers to me talking about myself or what I do internally with myself, that is first person. So Rajiv just thinking about himself or what I want or don't want, my thoughts, that is first person speech. Second person is you. I talk to you, you talk to me. It could be one individual in the family, in the office, it could be a group, it could be my community, but the I, you is second person speech, second person relationship. And third person is when I'm referring to an object. I'm referring to the weather in Princeton, which is pretty bad these days, or I'm referring to food, or I'm referring to God, or I'm referring to something else, some object that is not me, I, you. So yoga starts as a first-person dimension, but it doesn't stop there. It starts as an inner journey. And the inner journey is intended to achieve a state of higher consciousness, a better human being, and then from this better human being engage the second person, which means that my relationships improve, my responsibility towards society improves. It is not that I run away from all this, it is not that I escape all this. As a true yogi, I re-engage the world. A good example is Buddha, after enlightenment, didn't just go and run in some cave, he spent 40 years teaching. He's very concerned in teaching, helping people, compassion. And Shankara and Vivekananda. So the great yogis and the great spiritually enlightened beings in our civilization have been far different, very different from quite the opposite of the escapist, selfish type of person which we're often told that yoga might lead to. There's that fear that if you become yogis, you will not be good in cricket or you won't be able to fight the army. Actually, it's exactly the opposite. You'd be able to do all those things a lot better. So the first person approach of the inner journey leads to a better second person journey in the outer realm. And the third person is looking after the environment, the ecosystem, the different things that are out there which are not necessarily second person relationship but are matters of responsibility. So this is an important shift in our approach and our relationship to yoga that we have to achieve. The other point I want to make is that yoga has many paths, many ways. The Patanjali Yoga Sutra is one of the most well-known, and that's a profound system. But there's also Shiva Sutra, which is different than the Patanjali Sutra. In fact, the popularly known transcendental meditation of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi is from the Shiva Sutras. There's also Tantra, which is a profound system. And during the British times, because it was so unacceptable in Christianity, the whole idea of the body is a fallen body, sinner, the body is sort of something wrong and unclean, is so deeply ingrained that a lot of our people sort of wanted to disown, almost like disown things of bodily nature, the spiritual processes that go through the body, which is what yoga is all about. So there were some casualties and we kind of sidelined some of these techniques, but they are now coming back. Osho brought back a lot of Tantra, which is, I think, a very important part of our tradition. Dance, we can dance. It's the only tradition in the world where you can dance your whole philosophy. Even if all the books were burnt and all the pandits were gone, the dancer can revive the tradition because the dancer has to understand all these details. The musician has to understand. The Sanskrit chant has that encoding in it. So the different dimensions are very important to understand. There is, of course, the physical health dimension. That is one level you can start yoga. A lot of people want to start that because everybody needs health. It's proven. And this is why Baba Ramdev is so popular, because his entry point is health. And then, then the other systems of pran. Pran is not the same as breath. Breath is one part of pran, but pran is much bigger concept. It's a range of things. There's breath, there's attention, there's many things going on in pran. So pran is another method. Then mantra. Some systems have mantra. You introduce mantra, and mantra is not thought parade. It is not thinking. It is not contemplation. It is, in fact, the opposite, because it's a certain vibration which has the effect of calming the mind, reducing the thoughts, removing the thoughts, and the mantra remains, and then the mantra also fades away after a while, so that you have pure silence and heightened alertness. So there are systems like vipassana, where you're witnessing without processing what you're witnessing. There are systems when you're not introducing any content in vipassana. Then there are systems like mantra, where you are introducing the mantra. So these are very sophisticated, very scientific. A lot of research is being done. Sadly, not as much in our country. We should be validating, we should be figuring out what are the characteristics of these different types of yoga, different types of meditation, which one is good for what purpose, which one is good for different temperaments. We should be the world leaders. I proposed to a group of Indian-American successful professionals. 25 years ago, I used to give lectures all over, and I used to say that, people are starting gas stations, people are starting these convenience stores, motels. Why not start a franchise of yoga centers? And this would be an Indian thing. You'd make a lot of money. It's a good business because it's clean. You don't have inventory. You have a room, and there's a teacher who teaches. Students come, they pay around $15 per student for a class, and you have 30, 40, 50 students in a class. So in 1 hour, you make that much. And then you have 10 hours a day, many classes in a day. You can do the math. It's a decent business. And you can set up franchises all over the place. So even a little town like Princeton has several yoga centers, but not one of them is owned by Indians. So this has been a sad thing, that we've given up a very big resource which we discovered, which thankfully because of people like Iyengarji has still been preserved, but we have not fully taken over this thing in our hands. China, a few years ago, announced that they had studied various systems of health and mind management to see what would be good for a standardization in the school system. And they came up with a report that China must introduce yoga in the school systems, and they need 500,000 teachers. So they put out not a tender, but some kind of a thing that said, okay, now we're welcoming anybody to come and produce that much teachers. Not a single major Indian outfit has gone to do this on a large scale, certainly not 500,000. Most of the teacher training that entered China, guess from where it came from the US. So yoga, Americanized, exported to China. This is unfortunate, but this is what's happening. So I'm writing a series of books beyond the ones I already have, which are available, I'm told, downstairs or something. But I'm writing some new books on these areas of Indian contribution which have become obscure, which need to be brought out. 2 or 3 volumes on the Buddhist contributions to cognitive science and neuroscience. Several volumes on the different yoga systems, meditation systems for all sorts of benefits that people have been receiving. And I will leave you with the thought that India needs a narrative. It needs a narrative of unity. It needs, and this unity is, in my opinion, grounded in philosophical unity, yoga is at the very heart and at the very center of this philosophical unity. It's also a basis, a foundation for Indian soft power. We ought to understand that. As successful businessmen who transact in the world, you should know how to project your identity, who you are, in a very positive way. It's Indians who ought to be the experts in this area. And I would love it if the government would do something, but if the government doesn't do something about this, then maybe all of us have to come together. And this movie that we are gathered to celebrate is a major step in that direction. And my congratulations to the two producers and my gratitude to Manchali ji for hosting this. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, sir. It's in a very few minutes, you've given us enough anecdotes to make us aware of the kind of damage that we have already suffered and we continue to suffer. We just have about 5 minutes. And so if you have questions, he is very happy taking them.
It's a very good point. He refers to the word digestion, which I've described in my previous book, Being Different. Digestion being that a civilization gets digested into another civilization. So like a tiger digests a goat, and the goat is gone. All its organs and all its flesh has been converted into small atoms and then reconstituted into the tiger's DNA. And tiger becomes stronger, the goat has disappeared, he's digested. And this also happens with civilizations because there used to be, before Christianity, Europe was full of pagan religions, what are called pagan. And a lot of things were digested. The Christmas tree came from there, Valentine's Day, Easter. Many of the ideas in Christianity came from pagans, but the pagans disappeared. Similarly, the Native Americans, when the Europeans came, the Native American culture got digested. The Native Americans disappeared, but a lot of their things survive. And you see there, a lot of American sports teams are named after them, Washington Redskins, which of course the Native Americans consider insulting, but that's how it is. So the question I have been inquiring is whether our civilization is getting digested, whether yoga is just getting digested, it will become part of just regular mainstream stuff, and whether this will dilute and distort some aspects that are not digestible. So the problem with digestion is not that it is spreading, we want it to spread, but it is not spreading authentically. Certain things which don't fit the tiger, the certain parts of the goat that are not digestible are thrown out. So digestion is always imperfect and partial, and some parts are left out. So I have written a lot about what in yoga is not digestible in the West, because that would threaten them. There are certain philosophical premises, certain assumptions in yoga, which are like Tattvamasi is a very profound part of yoga. You are that, you are divine. You are not a fallen sinner, you are divine. And so am I, aham brahmasmi. So this kind of a thing is very difficult to properly digest without a confrontation with the Western paradigms. So therefore, when the digestion is done, so these sort of things that are troubling are left out. And hence when yoga becomes Christian yoga, why is it needed? It's not just a name change. Certain paradigms are changed. Because, for instance, we do Surya Namaskar. In Christian yoga, it's called sun salutation. You might think, what's wrong with that? Except the sun is not S-U-N, but S-O-N, Son of God. So it's salutation to the Son of God. So they have a picture of Jesus, sun salutation. So they have to shift it to a different paradigm, not just language, but also what the metaphysics implies. So what Rakesh is saying is that digestion is a problem for us, but what if we start digesting the others into our framework? That is, in fact, a good thing. And traditionally, civilizations have digested each other. Vedanta and Buddhism had a lot of cross-fertilization. Vedanta took a lot of ideas from Buddhism and Buddhism from Vedanta. And Hindu Tantra and Tibetan Buddhism, they interacted in this way. A lot of things have happened like that. But to be a digester of the other side, you first have to have a strong framework and a strong foundation on which you can assimilate. So if we are confused, we don't even know who we are, and we are not very secure in who we are not comfortable in our skin, so to speak, then a project to digest will really mean that we have become second-class Westerners. We have just basically adopted, rather than mapping it onto our framework, which requires understanding our framework. If we don't understand the framework, then we just sort of whole-scale adopted everything of theirs. This problem has happened already. This whole, actually we're speaking in English, Hindi में बात करनी चाहिए क्योंकि भाषा से ये होता है. There are so many categories of knowledge जो भाषा के साथ चले जाती है. There are certain words which are non-translatable. हमारे कई शब्द हैं जो अंग्रेजी में ट्रांसलेट हो ही नहीं पाते. जब आप उनको ट्रांसलेट करेंगे तो उनका मीनिंग चेंज हो जाएगा. जैसे योग को आप एक्सरसाइज नहीं कह सकते, जिम्नास्टिक्स नहीं कह सकते, प्रेयर भी नहीं कह सकते. इट्स जस्ट योग इज़ योग. So we have to understand what is non-translatable about our language, about our civilization. We have to teach that. We have to be proud of it. We have to develop the R&D. And as we are doing that, we can borrow whatever is good, whatever fits. Now, this is very, very true. ये आपने जो कहा ये बहुत difficult समस्या है, गंभीर समस्या है, इसलिए क्योंकि opportunism है. You can just start, you overnight become a guru and set up shop and practice and teach. There is no validation, certification, legitimizing. There is no sort of quality control. पहले ज़माने में था that you had to work very hard to be accepted by a guru to be his student. Student was not anybody can come. They were not marketing for numbers or for money, but a guru would accept only very few students. And so quality was very important rather than quantity. तो वो चला गया, तो अब it's become a numbers game. So in the numbers game, quality goes down, and so it's a very important point. How do you know which one to do? This is where we need our own research. It is not something that an average person in the public or a consumer can say X is good, Y is not good. We need good, competent research organizations where we consider this as an inner science. We have to, I call it Adhyatma Vidya. It is a science, and you need scientific laboratories, just like you have laboratories which test different things from pharmaceutical to see ये काम करता है नहीं करता है, कौन सा ठीक है, कौन सा नहीं ठीक है. So in the old days, there was this Purva Paksh system of validation through testing different ideas and debating them and so on. So there was this idea of inner science, Adhyatma Vidya, and enough critical mass of people practicing it so that there was a validation system. So ab wo nahi raha because of things we won't get into, all the historical destruction and whatnot which happened. We need to create that. We need to create institutions to do this sort of legitimizing. See, that's a matter of that's just a matter of choice. My latest book is called Indra's Net. It's not about Indira Gandhi. Somebody asked me कि कोई इंदिरा गांधी का नेटवर्क होगा. उसकी byline है defending Hinduism's philosophical unity. तो हमने वहाँ हिंदू शब्द यूज़ किया. दूसरी book before this, being different, I use the word Dharma. So I'm very flexible, you know, more interested कि idea आ जाए जो भी for a given audience जो भी उनको fit लगता है name they can use it. Indra's Net, just while I'm at it, Indra's Net is Indrajal. ये अथर्व वेद में there is a statement on what, this is a very beautiful story. अथर्व वेद में somebody asked what is the cosmos. तो answer है कि the whole universe, everything that exists is a huge net of jewels. Indra ने बनाए हैं, Indra has placed these jewels, infinitely many in all directions, jewels. And each jewel is reflecting all the other jewels. So each part of the universe contains all the other. Each electron contains the whole Brahmand, if you will. Every little ant contains the whole cosmos, if you will. So every jewel reflects all the other jewels, symbolizes that the universe is interconnected. The universe has intercontained, everything contains everything else. Nothing is separable. So this idea of Indra's net, Indrajal, got exported into Buddhism, Hua Yen Buddhism of China, which is considered to be the most advanced philosophical Buddhism in China, is called Hua Yen, H-U-A-Yen. And this idea of Indrajal is called Indrajal. It is not, and it is written in Sanskrit. The original Huayan Avatam Sak Sutra was written in Sanskrit and then translated into Chinese. So this then went to Zen in Japan, became Zen in Japan, also became Buddhism in South Korea and various places. So a lot of this East European Buddhism adopted a Vedic paradigm of Indra's net. And then Americans became Buddhists in last several decades. And the term Indra's net has become very common, popular for environmentalism, for holography, as a paradigm for interconnectedness, chaos theory. You'll find books like Indra's net and chaos theory, Indra's net and quantum physics, is tarah se. So the reason I titled this new book, Indra's net, is to reclaim it and bring it back to the source and say that all these ideas can be linked back. Now, to Rakesh's point, this is an example of reverse digestion. क्योंकि मैं सारी holography, सारी quantum physics, सारी ecology, सारी chaos theory, I'm bringing it back into my ancestral foundation, and I'm saying कि आपने जो value added की वो हम ले आएंगे. It's sort of like China leased Hong Kong to Britain for 99-year lease या कुछ ऐसे था, and then वो जो lease खत्म हो रही थी, तो China said we're taking it back. तो ब्रिटेन ने सेट कि इतनी हमने मैसिव बिल्डिंग्स बनाई हैं, बैंक्स हैं, बिलियंस ऑफ डॉलर्स के कैपिटल है, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है, एंड चाइना सेड व्हेन वी टेक इट बैक विद ऑल द वैल्यू यू एडेड. सो I am reverse digesting this U-turn project is to discover and identify what has been taken, how they've added value, what has been negative and distorted, wo nahi lenge, what is good they have done, which they also done, we'll take it back and enrich ourselves. So that is really what I'm trying to do.
I'm sure questions are a legion, and I see my friend Hari there raising his hand again and again. But thank you very much, sir. I think it's phenomenal, and प्रश्न इतना ही है कि हम आगे क्या करें.